Trespassing in a Child's Head Unwillingly by Kitty Cat on AO3. Chapter 35, The Last Battle. Izuku yawned, rolling backwards on his chair. His homework was only half done, work he had promised Miss Midnight he'd finish doing. No matter how he tried, though, his brain just wasn't in it. He was too focused on what would come tomorrow. Tsukuyuchi had told him to stay home. It was the safest place for him since they didn't actually know what they were facing. Izuku wasn't a hero student. He couldn't just show up to fight Tomura. Still, he felt sour at it. He was the one who had told Tsukuyuchi who Tomura was. Sure, maybe it was actually the Vestiges, but surely he got a say as well. He was the one who had spoken to Kurogiri. He was the one who had received the note with the address of Hosu. For crying out loud, he was the number one hero's own blood. Sure, he didn't want to be, but it had to mean something. He groaned, sliding out of his chair slowly. He had no energy to work or to even walk back to his bed. Not that sleeping felt right. Not since Kachan had started staying in the UA dorms for the hero students. He had tried to convince Nezu to let him stay as well, but the principal had remained firm in his decision. He couldn't have a teacher distracted by his son hanging around. Despite his small chat with All Might, the hero seemed to be constantly watching him now. Izuku always left whenever he came around. It just wasn't something he really wanted to deal with anymore. He had said his piece, and the man could only help him with his quirks so much. He couldn't even use the quirks because of the time limit. A time limit that was growing ever closer for both him and Kachan, who still didn't know about it at all. "Am I interrupting?" a voice asked, and Izuku scrambled to his feet. Kurogiri stood in front of him, his hands clasped in front of him politely. Izuku groaned, running a hand down his face. "Go to Tsukuyuchi with whatever you have to say," he ordered. "You're a wanted criminal." Kurogiri hummed, and Izuku could swear he heard a slight chuckle in the sound. "Unfortunately, no," he stated, not moving. "See, Tsukuyuchi is out for my arrest, and I simply cannot allow that to happen. You, however," he looked Izuku up and down, "there is very little risk you actually pose to me." Izuku resisted the urge to flip the man off, instead choosing to flop back into his chair. "My mama is in the next room." "And sleeping very soundly with her white noise machine," Kurogiri added, and Izuku glared at him. "I come with news I thought you might want to hear." Izuku hesitated, dropping his head into his hands. On one hand, he wasn't a hero student. He was a damn kid, like the Vestiges kept reminding him. And all he wanted, since everything, was to curl up with Kachan and watch shitty movies while eating popcorn. But on the other hand, he had an opportunity to help others. Sure, he had pretty much given up on the idea of being a hero. He saw what having one hero in the family had already done. Could he really live with himself, though, if he let others get hurt? If it was one of the others, they'd use this as a way to get all the answers they could. He finally sat back up, looking over to Kurogiri, who had since taken a seat on Izuku's bed. "Fine. Okay," he said reluctantly. "I guess I can listen." Kurogiri nodded, leaning forward. "There is a boy in your class. Tomura had interest in him from the sports festival." Izuku tensed as he continued. "Tell me, how did he manage to freeze you without so much as moving a foot?" Izuku scowled, shaking his head. "I'm not telling you anything about any of my classmates, even if I knew who you were talking about," he quickly added. "You know who I speak of," Kurogiri stated, and Izuku glanced away. "I assure you that I will not use this information to harm the boy. Rather, I see it as a potential end to this whole ordeal." Izuku shook his head stubbornly. Kurogiri sighed and went silent again. Izuku could faintly hear his mom's noise machine going. Auntie and uncle were out of town for a show, so he didn't have to worry about them coming in either. It was just him and Kurogiri, and the 7 ex-heroes living in his head. "My master is escaping," Kurogiri stated, and Izuku's head shot up. "He will kill all those in his path." Izuku pulled his legs onto his chair, shaking his head. "No, he's in Tartarus. He is never getting out." Tsukuyuchi had allowed him to look over the papers. Well, Kudo had looked over them. Izuku had seen it all, though. All the information the others try to keep hidden. The man couldn't get out. Kurogiri didn't say anything for a moment before he sighed. I can feel him. When it is silent, there is this itch under my skin. It does not cause me to scratch as it does my young master, but it is there, always. That is what he does. Implants himself in your brain along with a quirk. He glanced up, his mist eyes flashing with something dangerous. The body does not have to be free for the mind to roam. Izuku went to respond before he paused. There was a constant pressure on his head. Not like the one for danger scent, which was sharp. Rather, this one was calm. Yoichi. Izuku sighed, curling his head into his knees. He didn't even bother to explain his actions to the man who watched. He simply got himself comfortable and took a step back. Yoichi stepped forward. He was somewhat surprised at how quick Izuku had let him. Perhaps the child was more exhausted than any of them thought. He had not had to watch generations of heroes' lives and work as Yoichi had. The man seemed to notice the shift as Yoichi sat up, his posture stiffening. "Is it Bruce?" he asked slowly. Yoichi stifled a wince at the real name. He had spent years only using their numbers, but once 9 came along, that all went away. "No," he responded. "I am 1. You spoke of your master." He hesitated on the title, the word feeling wrong. No matter how much wrong his brother had done, he was still that, his brother. The same boy who had lifted Yoichi from the floor for years, who had fought off any bullies, the same man who had worked for years to support Yoichi when their parents had died. He was still Gyakko Shigaraki. He was the moonlight, soft and sure. Yoichi had seen the danger the man also possessed, only taking the light from the sun and brandishing it as his own. His brother had once been kind, but those days were long over. Kurogiri let him think before he stood. "I do not know you," he said slowly. "It is only Izuku and Bruce I have spoken to before." Yoichi chuckled, nodding. "Please, sit. I am not a threat to you." The man didn't sit back down. "Tell me what is happening to Tomura's mind. I have far more experience than one might think in that matter." Kurogiri finally sat back down, though the movement was jerky and wrong. "I do not care for that man. Now that I know the truth, I have little pity for him. However, the same cannot be said about my young master. He is but a child trapped in an adult's body." Yoichi resisted the urge to scoff, waving his hands. "I don't want to know your personal feelings. What I want is for Izuku's safety and that of all my holders. Now, tell me of All for One's hold on Tomura, and how you believe Shinso Hitoshi can help." Izuku flinched as another explosion rocked everything, chunks of brick falling by his head. He could hear the battle outside, and silently cursed himself for trusting Kurogiri. These tunnels did not seem safe in any way, and the fact they were crawling only made him feel more claustrophobic. He paused as another explosion crashed down, covering his head with his hands. Shinso bumped into him, cursing loudly. "Why the fuck did you stop?" he hissed. Izuku shushed him and he groaned. "No one is going to hear us over all that racket. Stop being a coward." He smacked Izuku's foot, shimmying to shove him forward. "We should turn back," Izuku said, trying and failing to see Shinso in the darkness. Shinso scoffed. "We're already going to be expelled if anyone finds out. You're the one who dragged me down here without telling me why." Izuku hummed, jumping at another large crash. "Miss Midnight will understand. We just need to—" "Izuku, if you don't shut the fuck up and keep moving, I'm going to rat you out," Shinso stated. "I'm dirty, and it's cold. We can't turn around if we wanted to." Izuku sighed, moving forward. Shinso was right, of course. They barely had enough room to move forward. Turning around would most likely get them stuck. He never should have listened to Kurogiri. "Hey, Shinso," he whispered as he kept moving. Shinso hummed in response, so Izuku continued. "What happened at the sports festival?" "What do you mean?" Shinso asked, though his voice was pinched. "You mean the creepy-ass ghosts that were holding on to you? Or the fact that you won by a stupid technicality?" Izuku scoffed but didn't argue it. The win had always felt cheap to him. He hadn't even won in a real fight. "You saw them?" he asked, focusing on the most important question. Shinso scoffed. "Hell yeah, I did. Creepy bastards talk to me. He paused before adding, "That's why I'm here, right? That's what the letter said." Izuku stopped again, getting another annoyed huff. "Letter?" Yeah, Shinso said, smacking him so he moved forward again. He did, before flinching away from another explosion. He could only hope everyone was safe. They had nothing other than the light at the end of the tunnel to go on. "What letter?" Izuku asked. Shinso didn't say anything for a moment. When he finally spoke up, he was hesitant. "The letter you sent to my house, telling me to meet you here." Izuku hummed, shaking his head. "Kurogiri. Was that not you?" Izuku didn't answer. "Do you think this will work?" he asked instead. Shinso huffed as they finally came to a place where they could stand up comfortably. It was a fairly good-sized opening, made entirely of concrete, cracks trailing up it. "I don't know," Shinso said, popping his neck, "but I'm pretty good at getting people to speak." Izuku scoffed, nodding. Shinso had managed to pick out Izuku's insecurity with his father, one he hadn't even realized was an issue until the sports festival. "Why did you step out?" Izuku asked, looking over to him. Shinso tisked, stretching up. "They spoke to me, scared the crap out of me. Not to mention, God, the headache." He shook his head, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I will never use my quirk on you again." Izuku chuckled slightly, nodding. He could be thankful for that, at least. "Still, this might be worse," Izuku whispered, and Shinso's gaze narrowed. I don't know." Shinso sighed, rubbing his eyes again. "Okay, fine. Just do what you need to fast. I could barely hold you." Izuku nodded, grabbing the rung of the ladder. He could feel Shinso behind them as they climbed higher and higher, the light seeping in from the top entry. There wasn't a grate at the top, just daylight, though smoke was already clogging Izuku's lungs. He coughed, crawling out. Shinso followed, sitting at the top. "Shit," he whispered, looking around the area. Izuku nodded in agreement, holding his arm up to block the smoke and dust. Everything was in ruins, no building left standing. He could see the explosions and smoke in the distance, but they were far enough away that there was nothing. He had taken out the entire city. It was just gone. Izuku hesitantly leaned down, picking up something from the floor. Half of it crumbled in his hands, the dust running off it. "What is it?" Shinso asked, looking over Izuku's shoulder. His breath caught in his throat. A hospital band," he whispered. "Hosu City Hospital. Somewhere they hadn't even thought to evacuate." His stomach churned as he took another look around, spotting patches of color in all the gray. Red. Splotches of red everywhere. He kneeled over, grabbing his stomach. Shinso gagged, looking away as Izuku threw up all his mom had made him eat for breakfast. No one was supposed to die. That's why Kurogiri had come to him. No one had to die. "They were already dying," a voice said from in front of Izuku. "It was simply to end their pain." Izuku screamed, grabbing Kurogiri's suit jacket. The man didn't move away, simply staring down at him. "How dare you!" Izuku screamed, still tasting the bile in his throat. "You could have saved them. You could have used your quirk and gotten them all out." Kurogiri hummed. "Not without its own consequences." He moved Izuku's hands off his jacket finally, looking towards Shinso. "It seems you got my note." "You," Shinso said, shoving Izuku out of his way. "You're that villain in the league, aren't you?" he asked, his fists bunching at his side. Kurogiri hummed, not responding. Instead, he turned to Izuku. "Have you mastered your quirk?" Izuku scoffed, wiping his face. "Is this all a game to you? People's lives? Children were here. Medical staff. People who save others every day died because of you and him." "If I recall properly, you are just as much an accomplice as I am," Kurogiri stated, taking the hospital band from Izuku's hand. "You could have ended this. The ones in your head could have ended this." "I spoke with one. He knew it all." Izuku shook his head. No, you're wrong," he stated, his stomach churning again. "That isn't—" Kurogiri scoffed, dropping the band to the floor. "If you are done dwelling on the past, it is time to prepare you." He said it so simply, as if those lives meant nothing to him. And they didn't. Izuku had forgotten that he was a villain. He was no longer a hero. He had seen and killed many himself. Shinso tapped him on the shoulder gently. Izuku glanced up at him, noticing his state. His eyes were red with tear tracks running down his cheeks. He just shook his head, wiping at his face. He went to speak before there was a clatter near them. "Are these the children you wish us to work with?" someone asked, and Izuku turned to see 3 people approaching. He had done his research now. He knew who they were. Toga, Mr. Compress, twice. More villains who had no care for human life. Izuku went to take a step forward, but Shinso put a hand on his shoulder. "This is them," Kurogiri answered, looking over. "Where are the other 2 that I requested?" Toga shrugged, skipping over the rubble and blood. "You are so cute," she giggled, stopping right in front of Izuku. "Green looks really good with red." She squinted, laughing as Izuku took a step back into Shinso. Dabi and Spinner both decided this was not worth it. "They have left our cause," Mr. Compress explained, leaning down to match Shinso's gaze. He hummed before he stood back up. "Is this what you want?" Kurogiri looked over them before he nodded. "Young master will be given back to us, even if we must do it by force." Izuku took a deep breath and pulled Yoichi forward. He stumbled, catching himself quickly. His vision split, colors dancing across as he groaned. "Are you okay?" Shinso whispered. Izuku nodded, too afraid to speak. Not because of Shinso's quirk, but because he didn't know who would respond. He leaned on Shinso as they weaved through the back lines, fading into the background. There were hundreds back here, most injured, all heroes now. "Detective Tsukuyuchi," Shinso said, moving right up to the man. He whipped around, his gaze searching both kids. His eyebrows were pinched, his face set in a scowl. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he hissed, crossing his arms. Izuku went to speak, but Yoichi took over. "Now is not the time." Tsukuyuchi looked surprised, but Yoichi continued. It felt wrong to Izuku, like his entire body was itching. "Me and Hitoshi Shinso need to go to the front lines. I will be able to get my brother to speak. Shinso will copy my voice and get a hold." Tsukuyuchi scoffed, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, one, but the answer is the same as 3 days ago. No." He looked over to Shinso. "I will be reporting this to your teachers. You will be reprimanded." "You don't understand, sir," Shinso whispered. "I have to help. I know I can help." Tsukuyuchi groaned, rubbing his eyes. "I don't have time for this, kids," he yelled before he took a deep breath. "Go home. Now." Izuku could feel Yoichi's annoyance join as he went to argue again. A large crash sounded and dust flew across the area. The swell threw them all back, and Izuku groaned, smacking his head on the ground. "I am not able to do this alone," Yoichi spoke to Izuku. "You must stand up." Izuku turned around, forcing his hands under him. "Shinso?" he whispered, his own voice leaving his mouth. "Detective?" His ears rang, but he could hear perfectly despite it. In fact, he could hear everything. Every sob that escaped someone's throat and every breath someone tried to suck down in the smoke, he could hear it. Which meant he heard the next words said. "He's dead. Your symbol of peace is dead." The words were booming, louder than anything. They were said so teasingly, but somewhere in Izuku, he felt a snap. He knew it was the truth. It wasn't him that finally stood up, but Yoichi. It was Yoichi who walked through the rubble, ignoring the yells from people under the dust and rubble. The sobs that cut through the air like a knife. Izuku knew he had to stay out, to stay present, but every fiber of him wanted to leave, to step back to his carpet where it was safe and warm. But he knew a new face would be there. Yoichi continued pushing them forward, his steps sure. "You must breathe," Yoichi reminded him, though he didn't tell him to calm down. Izuku knew the only reason he wasn't on the floor was because of Yoichi. They were his support, just like they had always been. He wasn't sure how long he walked for, or how his body kept moving. Still, he let Yoichi guide him forward. There was a man in front of him, his eyes so dark that they looked almost black. His white hair was so coated in dust that Izuku wasn't sure how he knew it was white. There was something else, a flash of red and yellow and blue. Eyes forward, Yoichi warned, and Izuku complied. He didn't know what else to do. Well, hello there, the man spoke, and Izuku finally forced his strange vision to focus. It was Tomura, though the voice wasn't his, like when someone else fronted for Izuku. Finally crawl out of your cave, brother, he asked, grinning. Izuku tried to speak, but Yoichi's voice came out instead. Leave the boys out of this, Gecko. This is between you and me. The man laughed, a sound that was so wrong. How bold of you to use my first name, Yoichi. He paused, tipping his head slightly. I apologize. You go by one now, don't you? Despite the voice coming from Izuku's own body, he ignored it. This wasn't meant for him. Instead, he focused on the man's face. Not on the messy state or the glare he was sending Izuku's way, but on the tear tracks down his face. Why would a man as powerful as All for One be crying? Tomura, Izuku said, and Yoichi let him. All for One scoffed slightly, taking another step forward. Izuku didn't step back. So you have the boy there as well, he said humorously. If he'd like to join his father, I'd be more than happy to comply. Yoichi went to step back, but Izuku held his ground, his eyes fixed on the man's black ones. Even when he lunged forward, Izuku didn't listen to Yoichi. All for One's hand stopped directly in front of his face, almost obscuring everything from view. He laughed, pulling his hand back. A foolish one, isn't he? All for One asked. You would have fled the moment I got near at one time. Despite his words and actions, there was something else there. A slight tick in his eyebrow and flash behind his eyes. He hadn't stopped the movement. Tomura had. Tomura, I know you're in there, Izuku said, taking a step forward. Izuku, turn around now, Yoichi warned, but Izuku paid it no mind. He was the last chance now. His father had passed this quirk on to him, and now his father was dead. He had to keep moving. Gecko, why won't you let the boy go? Yoichi asked, and Izuku hesitated in his step. Yoichi hadn't spoken. All for One laughed. Clearly, he started before all his movement stopped, his eyes turning white. Someone screamed from behind him, and Izuku whirled around to see Shinso on the floor, clutching his head in pain. Shinso, you need to send me in too, Izuku said, running over to the boy. He moved faster than he should have, but he knew Yoichi helped him. Shinso shook his head, sobs racking his body. I can't, he yelled through pain screams, his nose starting to bleed. He's here. Izuku spun around, turning to Tomura. Izuku, this is foolish, Yoichi warned, but Izuku ignored him. Tomura, I know you're in there, he pleaded. You can fight him. Kurogiri sent me to you. He wants to help you. He grabbed the man's wrists, repressing the urge to flinch at how cold they were. Shinso screamed louder, and Izuku watched as Tomura's eyes flickered between white and black. I can't, Shinso screamed. Izuku went to say something before he paused. He wasn't going to get through this way. Izuku, don't, Yoichi warned. He could feel the man resisting, but this was his body. He wasn't like Tomura. He had a choice here. He grabbed a piece of rubble from the floor, glad that somehow it was what he needed. I'm sorry, he whispered, though it was too quiet over Shinso's screams of pain. He dug the edge of the sharp rock into Shigaraki's palm, his hand shaking with the effort. Izuku, Yoichi warned again, louder this time. He saw the instant Shinso's hold dropped due to the pain. He heard Shinso's breath catch through sobs. He forced himself not to think about it as he licked the warm blood from the edge of the rock. He gagged at the bitter taste, stumbling back as he forced himself to swallow it. All for One screamed in rage and reached for Izuku as he gagged. Brother, Yoichi yelled, but it was no use. All for One was mad, and Izuku didn't feel good. He had spent the better part of his life with this power. He had changed and edited many notebooks in regards to it. Since Kamino, one thing had never sat right with him. That man. All for One. Izuku tripped over rocks as he tried to get away, gagging again. His vision was spinning and changing colors, and the man was getting closer now. He wasn't mad like Katsuki got. He wasn't running or screaming, but his eyes. His slow walk towards Izuku, who was trapped on the floor. He doubled over, clutching his stomach as the man got closer. There wasn't anything he could do. He had failed. He felt the cold fingers brush up against his back, and he screamed. His back erupted in flames and left him unable to think of anything else. He was going to die. He knew Quirk's. He knew Tomura's quirk. He wouldn't get lucky. He couldn't save Kacchan, All Might, or his mom. His mom would cry. Breathe, someone said, one who wasn't Yoichi or All for One. Another hand touched him. Everything was cold. And then everything was gone. Izuku wasn't sure what he had expected when he drank Tomura's blood. He hadn't actually thought it through, but he knew the man was already split. He was in Tartarus, in Tomura, and part of him was in Izuku's quirk. He had seen the man before. So maybe it was some foolish hope that somehow he would suck All for One's consciousness into him fully. Or maybe it would split and he would return to his body. His only thought had been how to save Tomura and Shinso. He hadn't expected this. To be alone for the first time he could remember. Utterly alone. The floor in the Vestige plane was cold. That was what he first noticed. The way the biting cold stung him and ran up from his bare feet. Why wasn't he wearing his shoes? He glanced up to ask before he paused. There was no one here. Their chairs were there, but they were just gone. Even All Might's mist form had vanished. Without their subtle light, the entire platform seemed darker, more muted in color. Everything was gray now. He turned around himself, trying to find his carpet. It wasn't there, though. There was nothing there. No notebooks or carpet, no plushes or toys. It was just more empty eternity. The platform that had once seemed to have an end didn't now. As far as Izuku could see, it was just empty. Yoichi? He whispered, but the name echoed. It repeated back at him, almost mocking him. He didn't speak again. Each step he took to the table felt more final than the last. Each movement he made seemed amplified. Each breath he took made his body hurt. This was very, very wrong, and he didn't know how he could fix it this time. He had always been able to fix things here. It was his home. He grabbed his chair and pulled it out slowly, the creaking and groaning of the false wood making his skin crawl and head ache. What was he supposed to do now? Yoichi always had the answers. This was supposed to be his quirk. He sat in his chair, still feeling like he didn't belong. The others had mentioned that he would move to the table when he was ready. He didn't feel ready now. Not when he was all alone with only his thoughts to keep him company. And they were torturing him. The facts of what had happened. The fact he hadn't been fast enough. He hadn't been able to save any of those people in the hospital. The fact he had trusted a villain at all. All Might, his father, who he had let die because he wasn't strong enough. He knew he could have done something different. Something that didn't cause Shinso to bleed from his nose and ears. To hear someone Izuku knew scream like that. It echoed again and again in his mind. All for One's taunts over it. Your symbol of peace is dead. Again and again. Izuku tucked his legs up as he gripped at his head. All the voices, Yoichi's warning, Shinso's scream, All for One, they melded together and made everything hurt and his body ache. He had nothing now. Everything he knew was gone. He wasn't even sure where here was. Breathe, the voice had told him. There was something so familiar about it. It wasn't Kurogiri's gravelly sound. It wasn't Yoichi. Izuku knew he had heard it before. Recently. He sat up quickly, twisting his hands around each other. Mr. Compress. He had known the voice. Did that mean the League had him? They had no use for him anymore. He'd failed with Tomura and gotten more people hurt because of it. He was useless. He couldn't even feel any of the latent quirks. Because their anchors were gone. Just gone. Okay, so, this is 2 different recordings, so there'll be a little cut in the middle, and then that should be it. Should hopefully get this out by tonight, and I plan to do the next one directly after. I am so sorry about that break. It sucks, because, I haven't even been doing that that long, but the fact that I had to write these and then record, it was so stressful for me. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I finish every story before I record to post it. And as I mentioned, I'm changing my posting schedule to every other day after the next chapter, which should be tomorrow. Overall, once I finish my stories, because I will always be writing more. I currently have 4 stories in the works that I have to get through. But if I don't manage to finish them in time, I am more than open to doing someone else's story. The issue is I would need suggestions from you, and I would need to contact the author to make sure it is all right for me to record their story, right? You can request any story you want. I will look at tags and decide whether or not it's something I would enjoy reading, because if it's not something I would enjoy reading, I don't know if I'll be able to put the proper energy into it, or if it will just become a drag and I'll start doing it less, which I really don't want. So feel free to suggest some. I'll look through the tags, reach out to authors if I feel like it's something I could enjoy or do well. Also, I don't have this marked as main character death. All Might dies, that's final. I don't think it should be marked as main character death, because he wasn't really a main character. He was a side character. We saw him, but we saw him in the same way we saw Midnight, an actual My Hero. And Midnight isn't a main character. She's a side character. So I feel like here that kind of logic still exists, so it probably shouldn't get MCD. Maybe I should tag it dead All Might, but I feel like that's some spoilers that I just don't want to put in the tags. And it's not like anyone who actually read this story had the most love for All Might by the end. Okay, and another thing, Izuku's not going to get all of the quirk. That just never happens in this. In case you haven't read it, all chapters are out of it. He just never got it all. Around Sports Festival, I kind of decided I didn't want him to get the quirk. And this, I think, was before I heard about all the discourse with, the fact he didn't actually, become a hero in canon. I think that was before all this discourse. I know that got really unpopular. So, it is what it is. Hopefully I wrote it well. Again, I'm so sorry about that wait. I'm recording the next one directly after this, and that one we're looking at over 5,000 words, so hopefully it makes up for it. And I will be starting on some of my other stories after I finish that as well. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you in chapter 36, the final chapter, The Cake.